Hello, this is Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology. And in this episode, I'll be talking about the Libra solar eclipse coming up on October 2nd at 10 degrees Libra. Now, we are in eclipse season. And so the first eclipse was 2 weeks ago, Pisces lunar eclipse. And that one was on September 17th, and it was conjoined to Neptune in Pisces. And at the time, astrologers noticed that it would be a major event that had a lot to do with the water element, but not just water for emotion. We also recognize that Neptune, it symbolizes the raw power of nature. And so, water sort of disasters, that's pretty much understood to be, we knew that that was coming in some form. And here in the US, we are really experiencing, so much of us that are on like the East Coast of the United States. I myself am in Southwestern Virginia. We have seen the devastation of this incredible hurricane that came through Florida and then up into the mid-Atlantic. Our neighbors in Asheville have been completely devastated. My heart really, really goes out to all of those people there. I have reached out to friends, and if you're in any of the area that's been impacted by this hurricane, I really deeply send my sympathy and my prayers. And those of you that are impacted, please reach out for help. Let people know like what we can do for you. And, it's not just in the United States, but there had been just before this floods in Europe that were devastating, a landslide in Nepal, devastation in Lebanon and the Middle East. I mean, really with Neptune, we never know really what side of it we're going to get. It can be this destructive side because Neptune's an outer planet. All of the outer planets just have incredible power when it comes to how they can manifest. And from an emotional standpoint, Neptune is the compassion, and that word compassion means to suffer with. And the only way we can have compassion is if we have suffering. And if we open our hearts enough to be able to connect with those that are suffering. So, compassion is a beautiful experience, really. Anything we can do to tap into that higher wisdom of care and compassion and transcend the everyday. That's the other thing that a lot of these outer planets can help us do is, even though Neptune is associated as the planet of transcendence, they all have something to do with going beyond just, our everyday, day-to-day existence. So, interestingly, during that Pisces lunar eclipse, because there was some positive aspects with Venus and Jupiter, the actual days around the eclipse, a lot of people and myself, had like really beautiful, nice, happy experiences. But it seemed like the more that the lunations were moving toward the dark moon, because the dark moon just prior to a solar eclipse, is a very, very dark moon. And it can often be associated with sort of, malicious type of energy. And that's when it seemed like we really got sort of the shadow side of that lunar eclipse conjunct Neptune, the more sort of experience of disaster. But, these planets, they continue to move and they continue to correlate to events on our Earth. And so this upcoming Libra solar eclipse, it is an eclipse of the sun. So while a lunar eclipse, we tend to see it in, the emotional realm of the moon, a solar eclipse will have a transformation of the sun. And it is a south node solar eclipse. And so the south node brings the past to the fore, right? So we may have experiences of, it's like we're living the past in some ways. And ultimately, a solar eclipse is a transformation of the solar energy. And we associate the sun with our conscious identity, with who we define ourselves to be. And in Libra, it is all about relationships. It's relating to another, and our experience with this other person. It's like they're our mirror. I mean, my husband's a Libra, and he's so considerate of other people, like always thinking about other people. And, the Libra archetype, if we think of it as the mirror, it is, how another person feels, whether they are happy or whether, they have a harmonious relationship. It reflects on me. I mean, that tends to be a lot of times the Libra approach to one's identity. And so for the solar eclipse, regardless of where your natal sun is, there is an opportunity to see ourselves differently, to have a different orientation to our own identity. And with the South Node, we may need to sacrifice some of our, self-centeredness in order for other people to gain benefit, right? And so this solar eclipse, because it's 3 hours long, and a solar eclipse its impact is for a year for each hour. So that's a 3-year trajectory for this eclipse to fully unfold. But we also really see the first year as, a real opportunity for transformation in this area of our chart. And this is the final eclipse in Libra that we will have for the foreseeable future for 9 years. And we've been having eclipses in Libra since October 2023. So this part of our chart has called for, a change in how we orient to how we relate to others and to our value system when it comes to relationships. How much do we accommodate others? How much do we connect with others with our sense of shared values? It can also be a change in value system and how we learn to get along with others as well. Now, relationships are really the realm of Libra, and it's so concerned with the quality of relating to others, whether that's cooperation. And Libra is about equal relationships, right? Balanced relationships. It's finding common ground. And it's also about weighing decisions, because we see Libra as symbolized by the scales. So we may have important decisions that we're constantly weighing. And it's interesting. I had heard I also am learning French. I've been learning French for like 30 years. And one of the things they say when it comes to decisions is, in English, in American English, we say we make decisions. But in Europe, and I believe probably in the UK and British English, they say take a decision. And I think in Latin America too, we might just be the only ones in America to say make decisions. I wonder if that's true, if it's just Americans. But, I've always understood us to make decisions. But so much more of the world says take a decision. It's like you have opportunities presented to you and you take one of them and that's your decision. Whereas in America, it's like we have to come up with an idea. And, when we decide on it, that's the decision we made. I think both can be true. But to me, that's just a really interesting, different way of viewing how we come to decisions. Now, those people like myself who are earth signs, we tend to see value in being decisive, making a decision so then we can move on and then we can make more decisions. And there's certain, there is value in that. But the ability to really weigh decisions so that we know that we can see, the value of different approaches, different perspectives. But ultimately, if we are so ambivalent that we don't come to a decision, then we're left with, no real path forward. And the fact that Mercury is in this eclipse, that also says there's information that likely will come through, if not at the eclipse period, certainly between the solar eclipse October 2 and the full moon in Aries October 17. More likely around, that solar eclipse, there may be information that was missed before or overlooked or maybe hidden, is important to how we decide to enter into agreements. That's the other thing that Libra is about. It's about the agreements that we make with others. And if things aren't fully on the table, we could have assumptions, and we may, what were some assumptions I had about this relationship or this agreement? And agreements could be contracts, marriage contracts, any kind of sort of contract we enter into. And it's important that we're clear on these things. And I was just doing a reading where I pulled an oracle card that was on the covenant. It's a sacred contract. And it was so interesting because, these important agreements we enter into, and these important, even when it comes to, say, work, like a work agreement or contract, is it just something that you're doing just time for money? Or is there a sacredness to it? Is there a contract where you feel soul connection to that which you're entering into? And this is the type of depth that we tend to get into with eclipses. We can see beyond just the mundane. Are we constantly rejecting or struggling against these contracts that we had at one time entered into, right? And if so, do we need to renew the contract? Do we need to call it void? So all of our agreements and relationships and any type of sort of two-way benefit that we enter into, we want to at this time look at them and see, where can we give more, where we can elevate our part of the contract. And are we truly in agreement to this? Do we not, is there part of us that isn't fully on board? And if so, why is that? Is there something within us that, is afraid to maybe be hurt again, or afraid to be abandoned or betrayed? And I use these, they may sound like, intense concepts, but the ruler of this solar eclipse is Venus in Scorpio. And Venus in Scorpio really wants depth. Now, she's considered in her fall in Scorpio. And the sun, by the way, is in its fall in Libra, right? So, when you have these planets and lunations that are in their fall, then we really want to consider that, they're struggling, in these signs they're in. And it's really going to take us to a place of depth. And when I think of Venus in Scorpio, it's like those relationships that need a sense of rawness, and I think tough love, but not like tough love that's like being held back from you. It's like, really saying that, like, let's get real in this relationship, because Venus in Scorpio is sort of commit all the way or nothing, right? It's like the ride or die friends that, will be with you through thick or thin, or even if you're going through, a tough time. They're not the sort of fair weather friends. We think of fair weather as Libra, and sort of more surface level. Like everything looks harmonious and nice on the surface. But with Venus and Scorpio, there is some real depth, and it can even take us to our areas of fear. But, it brings us to some intense experiences. And Scorpio is the realm of, the fear of losing ourselves in a relationship, the fear of abandonment, as I'd said. And, the fear of that it feels like a death if we've lost something that we love or that we value. And the other thing that's coloring this eclipse is the black moon Lilith is right there at 10 degrees with the sun. and with Mercury is at 11 degrees. I don't always use the asteroid goddesses, but when they're right there in the lunation, then I'm definitely going to consider what's the role of Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith is about rejecting oppression. That's one of the main things. We can feel oppressed by some kind of external force or relationship. And it can be a need to reject that. Or maybe we're the ones that feel rejected by another, right? And that actually can take us to a place of deep empowerment when we can realize that Black Moon Lilith is so associated with quitting that area of our, those experiences where, we may be in the Garden of Eden, which Lilith was Adam's first wife in the Garden of Eden, and would not accept him oppressing her, mounting her actually. And so she, of her own accord, left the Garden of Eden. I think there's a version where she's the one banished, but apparently the original story is she rejected being in essentially a golden cage, and that led to her own empowerment. It's like taking that risk to embody your own empowerment, right? And there can be a feeling of rejection. There can be a feeling of, sometimes if we're the ones being cast out of, the Garden of Eden or wherever, it may ultimately be for our own benefit, especially if we feel like we've made a deal with the devil, right? That led to our own oppression. And so thinking about these themes in relationships that, are particularly present right now at the solar eclipse. And so if we do feel like we have to empower ourselves, then that is something that, may take a lot more of that, that diplomatic sort of Libran energy to say, making sure that we do so in a way that, we can leave with our head held high or we can move forward with a sense of dignity. And the other thing is we have Mars trine Saturn, which is about working toward progress, and rebuilding of structures. So there can be this really positive energy of having the passion of Mars being supported by the Saturnian sort of responsibility and structure, and working toward building something up. So it could be in relationships, maybe we want to be in relationship because Libra ultimately wants to bring people together, but it may take having some really deep and raw truths. Again, maybe there's some information that comes through that demands that we talk about things, we talk things through and realize, like, is this a relationship, whether it's a relationship, a job, some kind of commitment that we can really put our heart and souls into. And in order to do that, maybe we have to have some, some real raw conversations. And again, recognize when we're being oppressed and when we need to, reject that oppression. It's also a really important time during solar eclipses to reflect and have some introspection. Now, any eclipse is in shadow, right? And the solar eclipse is when the consciousness, the light of consciousness, is blacked out temporarily. And I would say, like, the days, like even the 24 hours before and after an eclipse, especially, we may feel confused. And from that confusion can come anxiety, can, even paranoia to an extreme. But we don't really want to go there. We just need to be patient, to wait and see, and the light will return. It's like, where do we go in those times of darkness? Can we move through them with a sense of trust and with a sense of calmness and groundedness, and just be prepared to see what's on the other side. And so, I really always take these times of solar eclipses, to be an opportunity to listen to what is the change and the transformation that's happening on the inside, because any great change in our lives has to come through the inner world, before we can truly express it genuinely in the outer world. And so I really encourage you to, if you can, take some time at this solar eclipse, to reflect on, what are the relationships in your life that are worth nurturing, and where's the harmony that is needed in your life that you can bring into, and call in that Venus and Scorpio. I have Venus and Scorpio natally. And, it's like you can have like several people in your lives who you are pleasant with, but it's those few people that you can really share your shadow with, that won't reject you but will welcome you, and not even despite your shadow, but because of it, that they love that side of you. And I think everyone should have people in their lives that they could really open up in that way. And it could be friends, it could be people that you just love so deeply, as friends. And Mercury in this mix also can represent friends and siblings, or people like siblings. So it's really an eclipse that is about relating and relating to others. And we may want to put on, a pleasant exterior, and be as diplomatic or as kind as we can. But that Venus and Scorpio, as I said, is really seeking relationships that can go to the rock bottom and back, right? Because Scorpio is the underworld, but where the underworld is where we find, our greatest treasures. All right, my friends. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. And thank you so much for listening. And I wish you a beautiful and magical solar eclipse. Take care. Until next time. Bye-bye.